I don't think photography is an expressive art form. What do I mean by that? Well, give me a second and I'll tell you. And please watch to the end, because chances are if this video upsets you, it's likely because you didn't see it all. Before we get into this, I want to start with a couple disclaimers. Photography is a very big genre. There are many types of photography, and this viewpoint doesn't apply to all of them. And even within the types of photography that I'm talking about, it's not 100% certain. Nothing is black and white, which is why I'm very careful about generalizations. Not all anything is anything, except for Canon shooters. They are all dorks. This doesn't really apply to the types of photography that are staged, like portrait or studio photography. This is more about landscapes, street, wildlife, stuff like that. So from now on, when I say photography, I'm talking about these latter examples. Let me ask you this. How many times have you gone out shooting with a clear idea of a photo you want to capture in your head? Did it pan out that way? It's possible, sure, but it's so rare for me that I try not to get too clear an idea of a photo I want to capture, as to avoid getting frustrated and begin crying when it ultimately doesn't materialize, because it's really hard to see clearly through a viewfinder with tears in my eyes and a full diaper. I don't think it's always harmful to have an idea of what you want to capture when you go out, but I do think it can sometimes be counterproductive, and you might be better off using some of that creative energy to capture what is in front of you rather than what you want to be in front of you. In fact, if you're too narrowly focused on a particular image that's in your head, you might completely miss other images as they present themselves. I can't tell you how many times I've been editing a POV video and I see awesome photo opportunities in the footage, especially while looking for a place to hide a pug, that I completely missed when I was out shooting. It was a bit of a tangent, but it's related, I promise. Here's something that's sure to ruffle a feather or two. It really irks me when people say make photos as opposed to take photos. It also irks me when people say that things irk them. I've heard a lot of photographers argue that since you make other forms of art, why don't you make photos? Because you don't, at least not entirely. Will this give me more views? A lot of popular YouTubers do this after a scene transition. Run up and talk to the camera like it's a quadriplegic child sitting on the floor. We call it taking photos because you're capturing an image from what's already in the world. Even when a painter paints what's in front of them, they're taking the likeness and translating it to paper, or canvas, or boob skin, or whatever. If, however, the painter or boob tattoo artist creates an image from scratch, from their imagination, I could consider that making the art. Let's try another example. You're at McDonald's, and a drunk person in front of you is harassing the 16-year-old behind the counter because clearly they deserve it for having the nerve to be out of chicken nuggets at 10 o'clock at night, and you decide to pull out your phone and start filming. The finished video could loosely be considered art, but did you make that video? Or did your surroundings make the scenario and you just pointed a camera at it? Is it intent? Is the intent of creating a work of art all that's needed for it to be considered art? Good question. Am I gonna keep asking you questions you may or may not actually have? Maybe. Am I gonna keep providing answers that may or may not be a yes or no? The answer is yes or no. Okay. My first true love for an art form was music. I spent most of my childhood and adult life playing guitar and writing music, an art form that when you start writing a song, you start with nothing. Of course, there are music genres that borrow from others, and at the end of the day, we're all just a collection of what's inspired us up to that point. Nobody is truly original, and we're probably all living in a simulation, hopelessly grinding away trying to maintain relationships that are ultimately meaningless because we'll all die alone. God, that went off the rails. But I think the difference between music and photography is like the difference between building a house with the trees in a forest or building one with a large delivery of lumber and a bunch of predetermined rooms to mix and match. They're both art, and they both require creativity, but it would seem to me that they have different starting points, and they may even be using different parts of the brain. With music, the options are almost entirely limitless, but that can lead to decision paralysis. Whereas with photography, you have all the elements in front of you. It's up to you to figure out how to fit them together. Sometimes it's not even up to you at all what elements will be in your photo, because there's a massive part of these genres of photography we haven't mentioned yet. Luck. I wouldn't call anything during the music writing process luck, unless you consider a melody that pops into your head randomly while falling asleep luck. Of course, it's worth mentioning that not all musicians are masters at expressing their inner emotion through music. They can still create great music and be wildly successful. But my favorite musicians, and I would imagine a lot of your favorite musicians, are the ones who can clearly communicate what's in their head into their music. What defines a great artist to me is someone who has mastered the translation of their emotion and what it means to be human to their art. Take, for example, Devin Townsend. Can Canadian progressive metal musician. He's often heralded as a genius by his fans, and whether or not you believe that, he's very clearly an incredibly gifted musician. His ability to accurately transcribe his emotions into his music is unparalleled to any other artist I've listened to. If you're into metal or just a fan of music, check out the album Empath that he released in 2019. It takes you through a broad range of emotion and how it relates to his surroundings, and honestly, it just tries to define the very thing that makes humans human. I find that level of focus on internal humanity from the perspective of the artist largely missing in photography. A great photographer doesn't need to define their own humanity in their photos, they need to recognize it in others, and almost as important, to act on it at the right time and in the right way to capture it, and hopefully not get beaten up and labeled a weirdo in the process. Though if I'm being honest, getting beaten up might make you a better artist, if you believe we must suffer for our art. Maybe just don't end up in a coma with a feeding tube. But if you do, maybe you'll be heralded as the greatest photographer of all time. All right. That capturing part, the physical and technical part, I find to be more important in photography than in music. You could have a great idea for a photo, but if you don't take the photo, you haven't really done anything. With music, you could write an amazing symphony and pass it to a group of musicians to play, and you'd still fit the definition of artist without ever touching an instrument. Of course, all art is on a sliding scale, a spectrum with limitless granularities at every point. I just find that photography often lands near one end and music near the other. I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other. They're both art, they're just different types. Music taps into you while influenced by the outside world, while photography taps into the outside world and is influenced by you. I find a similar difference between rap and hip-hop and instrumental music. If this is the scale, and right in the middle is music, I find rap to be further to one side, more closely related to poetry, whereas instrumental music might be closer to the middle. And of course, many other genres that fill out every point on the scale. They're all related to this elusive definition of music that we have in our heads, and they're all completely legitimate forms of art, they're just different. I'm gonna do a video like this soon about AI-generated art and whether or not we should really be calling it that, so stay tuned. I'm hoping this isn't coming across like I'm putting down photography and talking up music. Ever since I was a young man, I've pretty much always had that itch inside me to be making something at all times. You know, like a curse. So much so that anytime I see any type of art that inspires me, it almost always translates in my head as something I can internalize and use as inspiration to create something myself. Sometimes I do wish I could just consume a piece of media like a normal person. But anyway, my point is, if photography didn't scratch that itch, I wouldn't do it. It is still very much a creative endeavor and something I deeply love doing. Of course, none of these are rules, and there's always exceptions. Maybe you're a street shooter and you regularly are able to express your own emotions in the photos you capture. But I think for the vast majority of us, we go out waiting and hoping for something to happen and then capture. And I think that capturing part is very important. With music, we spend hours and weeks and even years crafting a song slowly and methodically to create the finished product. But with photography, we seem to practice finding compositions that are compelling, forging those neural pathways in our brains so that we can act on them in a matter of seconds, letting our lizard brain take over and act out of pure impulse to capture the moment before it's over. So what do we do with this information? What was the point of this video? I don't know. What's the point of any YouTube video? Is this just the insane ramblings of somebody being held against their will and being forced to record videos for a violent and unpredictable pug captor? I guess we'll never know. But I'd like to hear your thoughts. What's your definition of art? Do you agree or disagree? If you disagree, can you shut up because you're wrong? Or maybe I should shut up because I'm wrong. Feel free to let me know. Just try to keep it to one slur per comment, please. What other forms of art do you find similar to photography? Maybe music is exactly the same, I don't know. I think being artistic is bound to be confusing, and I think the more we learn, the more questions we have. Maybe that's why the drive to create is so strong, like exploring the cosmos, but inside our stupid, squishy meat vessels. Maybe trying to define art is just another difficult task because of our limited human perspective. It's like studying the human brain. You're studying it with your human brain. I always think about stuff like this, and I'm genuinely curious what other people's viewpoints are, so let me know. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to watch another video, click right here. You would think there wouldn't be enough space in between. If I'm in the middle, I didn't move the camera. Please subscribe. I love you guys.